Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Meet Praneeth. In today's video, we are going to discuss some important tips that you have to keep in mind if you're traveling on H-1B back to your home country or for leisure, or if you are also trying to go for an H-1B stamping or an H-1B extension. Now, with the recent change in the administration, as you might have been seeing the videos on my channel or other news outlets, there are a lot of changes that are happening, specifically in the immigration. A lot of executive orders have been signed, and some are in process, and there are a lot of things that are hanging around. In these scenarios, it's very important that you make sure that you have all the documents and all the important tips with you when you're traveling outside of the United States. So first of all, let's imagine some scenarios, and accordingly I will tell you which are the documents or which are the tips that you have to remember. So let's take the first scenario. Let's say Mr. X or Mr. John Doe wants to go to India for an H-1B stamping. They recently got their H-1B I-797 approval, and now they are planning to travel to India to get their stamping done. In this case, there are several things that you have to keep in mind. First of all, the very first important thing is that you have to tell your employer that you are going to travel for stamping. Now the question comes, why? The reason is these days, with the increased stringency, with the increased protocols or security, there might be delays in your visa processing, and you don't want to be in a situation where your employer doesn't know why you're not back into work, or why you are not back in the United States. In that scenario, the first thing you have to do is tell your employer very clearly that, well, you're going to travel. You're traveling to your home country. You're going for an H-1B stamping that requires two processes. First, the fingerprinting, and the second is interview. And because of the change in administration, there might be delays in visa processing. So that your employer is aware that, well, if there's something goes wrong or there is some delay in your processing, they can wait for you to come back. The second important tip, when you're planning this travel for H-1B stamping, make sure you have following documents really well covered. First of all, any salary slips that for the last 6 months, take a printout, keep them with you. Any kind of tax returns that you have filed, take a printout, maybe a copy of the return, and keep it with you. The full H-1B application that was filed, take a printout. It would be a big application, but keep it with you. Labor certification is important, keep it with you. Now the question comes, what are the things that you have to keep in mind because you're traveling? So you should, when you're coming back, the officer at the CBP, they might ask you, well, do you have a home here? Or where do you live? And what's the proof that you live there, right? So the other set of documents that are important is, first, we covered all the H-1B related documents. For example, your salary slips, your employment verification letter. Sorry, I missed that. So when you're traveling, before you travel, tell your employer that you're going for this stamping, so that they can provide you an employment verification letter, which can clearly state what is your role in the company, from which state you started, and what is your current status. Simple, effective 3 to 4 lines from an HR, signed, so that when it's required, you can submit that to the officer. Now, in terms of the documents that are required in terms of coming back to the United States, first of all, your passport. Once you get your stamping done, make sure it has the stamp, it has all the information clearly mentioned. Your visa doesn't have any misspellings or any problems. Make sure all the information is correct and is up to date. The second is that you should carry your driver's license in the United States if you carry one, or any kind of state ID. And apart from that, if you have a lease agreement, like if you stay in a rental property, take a lease agreement. If you own a house, take some kind of paperwork to show that you own a house and that you have an address. For address, you can also take an electricity bill that is 6 months or less from the time. These things will help you in 2 or 3 different ways. First, let's say you are coming back and the officer just randomly asks you, okay, well, you went for your stamping, but what is the proof that you work here? So you have an employment verification letter, you have some salary stubs. Let's say they ask you, okay, well, I need some proof that you live here and there's a home address that I can associate you to. So you can provide your electricity bill or your lease agreement to cover that. And as I said, apart from that, all your H-1B application material, the labor certification, employment verification letter, all of that is very important. Keep that handy. Don't keep it in the check-in bag. Keep it with your carry-on bag so that if it's asked, you're ready to produce it. Now let's imagine a scenario where you're not going for stamping, you're just going for extension. In those cases also, though it's just a drop off, but be sure that you have enough time planned just in case something goes wrong, that you're okay to wait and your employer is okay for you to come back to the country. Now, some other tips that are very important while traveling is whenever you're traveling, make sure you have all your documents with you. It's not like you should be leaving your important documents at home, specifically like a passport you would carry, but any kind of, as I mentioned, your driving license, your tax returns, your any kind of let's say lease agreement, make sure they are with you. So this kind of covers the scenario which I was talking about, the stamping. The similar scenario applies when you're just traveling for fun, for leisure, or just to meet your parents, or just going back home. Same thing applies to you as well. Even though if you have an H-1B stamped, it's very important to keep the following documents. First of all, your I-797 approval. And that should be also the case because you're going for stamping, so you should carry that because that is a required document. Similarly, if you're having an H-1B stamp, but you should carry your I-797, I-94, labor certification, all the other documents that we just discussed, like salary stubs, lease agreements, and all of that. You never know what kind of situation you might come into, right? So you have to be prepared. The other thing is, a lot of people ask me, is there any things that you should be taking care of while you're gone, and let's say you don't get the entry back. Now, this can happen. Let's say you travel to India, you're trying to come back, but you denied entry. In that case, the first thing that you should do is make sure that you have some contact in the United States, right? So imagine a scenario. Let's say Mr. John Doe traveled to India for fun or for meeting parents or whatever the reason is, but when they were coming back, they were denied entry. They had all the documents, but there was something that the officer thought that you should not be given the entry back to the United States. What should be your response? The first thing that will happen with you, you might be taken to a secondary check. You might be asked more questions. And then if the officer is still not satisfied for your entry into the United States, you might be deported. So what is the thing that you can do? Because let's say you might have your family here, right? You might have your house, you might have your car, personal belongings, and whatnot. So what should be your action? So one thing that you should definitely do is make sure you have a US contact, and a contact in your company or some immigration attorney that you have come across through your H-1B filing or through your company or maybe through LinkedIn. Just make sure you have that contact, because as soon as you get a chance, call them, explain the situation, and see how they can help you. In most cases, if the officer tries to deport you, then the only thing that you can do is have to go back and then try again once you're back into country. But in certain scenarios, if they give you a chance to talk to your attorney or maybe ask someone for help from your office, from your legal help, do have a contact. Again, I'm not trying to scare you that this can happen with you, but this is all the possible scenarios that you have to cover, and make sure that you are all covered when you're traveling on your H-1B. In the next video, I'm also going to discuss of all the raids that are happening across the country for undocumented migrants or illegal immigrants. But in some cases, what happens is, like, maybe you're living legally, but you just get in front of an officer and they might ask you, okay, what's your status? So how to tackle those questions, how to prove that you're a legal immigrant is an important question, and I'll cover that in the next video. So stay tuned, and as I said, when you're traveling, make sure you cover all these documents, carry all these documents, have those tips in your mind, so that you can travel peacefully and come back to work and to United States. With that, thank you, and I'll see you in the next video very soon.